Welcome aboard, welcome to today's tour. Today we are in Normandy, France. We are flying over the site of the D-Day landings. These are the beachheads that were part of Operation Neptune in June of 1944, the start of Operation Overlord and the liberation of Western Europe. We are at the Caen Kapaki Airport, and our flight plan will take us from east to west, and our final destination is the Cherbourg Maupertuis Airport. Let's get the plane started, the cockpit set up, and we will be on our way.
This is Robert St. John in the NBC newsroom in New York. Ladies and gentlemen, we may be approaching a fateful hour. All night long, bulletins have been pouring in from Berlin claiming that D-Day is here, claiming that the invasion of Western Europe has begun.
Short taxi today. If this is your first time on a tour, welcome. What I do is find interesting places to fly to and talk about, and we visit them here in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Today we are back in the Cessna Skyhawk. We are at the hold short line. We are ready for takeoff. Find your seat, buckle up. We will be in the air shortly. As we depart the airport today, we are heading to the easternmost landing site on D-Day. And then as the flight plan shows us, we are flying west along the shoreline and we will end up in the Cherbourg area. June 6, 1944. British, US, and Canadian forces invade the coast of Normandy here in northern France. The landings were the first stage of Operation Overlord, which was the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, and it aimed to bring an end to World War II. The landings here in Normandy were actually codenamed Operation Neptune, and by the end of the first day, 156,000 Allied troops will have arrived in Normandy despite challenging weather and fierce German defenses. At the end of the day, the Allies will have established a foothold here in France. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, he knew that Germany was in grave danger, with the Allies expected to invade Europe at any time. He said the first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. He said the fate of Germany depends on the outcome. For the Allies, as well as Germany, it will be the longest day. D-Day, 6th of June 1944, was indeed the longest day. Under cold, cloudy skies and choppy seas, a giant armada of fighting men with ships and planes headed south across the English Channel for Normandy. The Germans expected an invasion along the north coast of France, but they didn't know exactly where. Their guess was it would happen at the narrowest point between England and France, at Calais. The invasion was planned for 60 miles of shoreline here in Normandy, and it was divided into 5 landing zones, with the code names Utah and Omaha on the west, where the American troops would land, Gold and Sword, assigned to the British on the east, and the Canadians at Juno in between the two. The night before D-Day, minesweepers cleared the Channel waters for the thousands of landing craft that would follow the next day. The Allies put a lot of effort into trying to convince the Germans that the invasion was going to happen near Calais and not Normandy. They invented and staged complete phantom field armies with dummy equipment like inflatable tanks. The location of these phantom armies, as well as misinformation leaked through the use of double agents, would convince the Germans that the invasion was coming in the Calais area. The Germans took the bait so much that even after D-Day, they held some of their best troops in the area of Calais, expecting a second invasion there. The original date for the operation was June 5th, but it was delayed 24 hours due to poor weather conditions. In fact, the forecast was so bad that the German commander in Normandy, Erwin Rommel, felt so sure that there wouldn't be an invasion. He went home to give his wife a pair of shoes for her 50th birthday. He was actually in Germany when the news came of the invasion. We have reached the shore. The first beach here is Sword. Bad weather and strong German resistance hindered the British 3rd Division's assault on Sword Beach, the easternmost of the beaches. Rising tides and the geography of the assault area created a narrow front and caused congestion and delays, and making it difficult to land the armored support needed for the advance inland. Although the 3rd Division successfully repelled a German counterattack, it failed to take the strategically important city of Caen, its key objective for D-Day. Along with the British 3rd Division, there were 177 Free French commandos. The capture of Caen would become the focal point of the British strategy in the weeks to come, and the city was not fully occupied until mid-July. The amphibious landings were preceded by extensive aerial and naval bombardment and airborne assaults. The operation began early on June 6th, just after midnight. After a flight across the English Channel, 120 American Pathfinders jumped into Normandy. Using fluorescent panels and radar beacons, the Pathfinders set up a series of drop zones for the air assault by the 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne Divisions. 50 miles to the east, 60 British Pathfinders from the 22nd Independent Parachute Company were performing a similar task on the eastern edge of the invasion zone. The next beach is Juno. The Canadian 3rd Division's objective was to secure Juno Beach and link up with the British forces on Gold to the west and Sword to the east. Rough seas delayed the landing, and the rising tide reduced the width of the beach, which eventually became jammed with incoming vehicles and equipment. Juno was heavily defended and the casualties were high, especially among the first wave of landing infantry. By midnight, the Canadians had yet to link up with the British at Sword, but had cleared exits off the beach and advanced several miles inland and had joined up with the British at Gold. About 30 minutes after midnight, 181 men of the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, part of the 6th Airborne Division, landed in 6 gliders close to 2 small bridges. Their mission was to capture the Caen Canal and Orne River bridges and hold them until reinforcements arrived. At about 1:15 a.m., the main American airborne assault began. With 6,600 men from the 101st and 6,400 men from the 82nd, parachuting from 882 planes into 6 drop zones at the western end of the invasion zone that had been marked by the Pathfinders. Next, we are making it to Gold Beach. Nearly 25,000 men of the British 50th Division landed on Gold Beach on D-Day. Their objective was to capture the town of Bayou and the Caen Bayou Road and to link up with the Americans at Omaha. High winds had caused the tide to rise more quickly than expected, concealing the beach obstacles underwater. But unlike on Omaha, the air and naval bombardment had succeeded in softening the German coastal defenses. By the end of the day, British troops had advanced about 6 miles inland and had joined with the troops from the Canadian 3rd Division, who had landed on Juno Beach to the east. Later that morning, troops from the 9th Parachute Battalion, part of the 6th Airborne Division, arrived, and their mission is to destroy the Merville Battery. It was a well-fortified German position with 4 150mm guns that could reach Sword Beach. At around 6:30 a.m. D-Day is when the main invasion force arrives, about 150,000 troops with vehicles, armaments, and supplies, and they begin to hit the Normandy beaches. When reports of the Allied invasion came in, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler was actually asleep. None of his generals would dare to commit reinforcement troops without his permission, and they also didn't dare to wake him up. So these first few critical hours were lost in the battle to hold Normandy by the Germans. When Hitler finally did wake up, around 10 a.m., he was excited at the news of the invasion. He thought that Germany would easily defeat the Allies. As Rommel had predicted, those first few hours were crucial, and they had now been lost. Again, there were 5 beaches that were chosen for the operation, and they were codenamed from east to west: Sword, Juno, Gold, Omaha, and Utah. Omaha and Utah are places in the United States, and Sword, Juno, and Gold were named after fish: swordfish, goldfish, and originally jellyfish, but that was changed to Juno. The D in D-Day simply stands for day, and the term is used to describe the first day of any large military operation. We are at Omaha Beach. Troops from the U.S. 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions landed on Omaha on D-Day. Omaha Beach also turned out to be one of the more heavily defended areas of the assault, and the casualties were higher than on the other beaches. The air and naval bombardments leading up to the invasion had also failed to knock out some of the strong defense points along the coast, and the Americans had great difficulty clearing these beach obstacles. It turned out that the experienced German 352nd Infantry Division was also taking part in an anti-invasion training, and they were able to reinforce the coastal defense units at the time of the invasion. Even with these challenges, the Americans were able to gain a small foothold on the beach by the end of the day. As we make our way from Omaha to Utah, we will pass over Point du Hoc. This is where the U.S. Rangers completed an assault on a German gun emplacement on the top of the cliff. At the top of this 100-foot cliff, the Germans had placed 155mm artillery pieces, and they could have wreaked havoc on the 2 American landing zones. After the Rangers fought their way to the top of the cliffs, it turned out the guns had been moved. They were later found inland and destroyed. Once we make it across the water here, the shoreline will be Utah Beach. Over 23,000 men of the U.S. 4th Infantry Division landed on Utah Beach, which was the westernmost of the assault beaches. Just by chance, strong currents had swept the first wave of troops into a slightly less defended sector of the assault area, 2,000 yards south of their original target. The airborne troops that had been dropped in behind Utah early on the morning of June 6th had endured intense fighting, but had secured a causeway across the flooded lowlands, and this provided a route for the troops on the beach to move further inland. By the end of the day, the 4th Infantry Division had advanced about 4 miles inland. As D-Day drew to a close, 2 glider operations would get underway. These were to reinforce and resupply the airborne troops who had parachuted into Normandy 20 hours earlier. 176 gliders, codenamed Operation Elmira, descended on the western end of the landing zone to relieve the American 82nd Airborne, while to the east, Operation Mallard was in progress. On 2 landing zones northeast of Caen, 249 gliders would touch down to reinforce the 6th British Airborne Division. As midnight approached, 156,000 Allied personnel were ashore in France. The operation included the use of over 6,000 ships and 11,000 airplanes. Exact casualties aren't really known, but the estimates are that there were 10,000 either killed, wounded, or missing in action, of which 6,603 were Americans, 2,700 were British, 946 were Canadians. Although on D-Day, the Allied forces consisted primarily of British, US, and Canadian troops, they also included Australian, Belgian, Czech, Dutch, French, Greek, New Zealand, Norwegian, Rhodesian, which is present-day Zimbabwe, and Polish and naval ground support troops. Let's make our way to our final destination so we can take a look around the airport here in Cherbourg. While we prepare for a landing, this would be a great time for you to reach down and hit that subscribe button. It really does help the channel and I appreciate it. Everything we've talked about today was just my personal research, so if you have any more comments, corrections, or anything to add, please leave it in a comment below.
Unconfirmed by Allied sources, of course, says that heavy fighting is taking place between the Germans and invasion forces on the Normandy Peninsula, about 31 miles southwest of Le Havre. Another bulletin, also from Berlin Radio and unconfirmed, says that British-American landing operations against the western coast of Europe from the sea and from the air are stretching over the entire area between Cherbourg and Le Havre, a distance of about 60 miles. I repeat, there is no confirmation. And here's another bulletin just in. DNB, the German agency, says, this is unconfirmed, that the most important aerodromes in the area of the Normandy Peninsula of France have been wiped out. Now, I presume that means wiped out by the Allies. As you may have heard on earlier broadcasts, all 3 German news agencies have begun broadcasting these stories that the invasion is here. But there is no Allied confirmation as yet.
So communique number 1 will be released to the press and radio of the United Nations in 10 seconds. Repeat, 10 seconds from now. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
We are on the ground. Thanks for flying with me today. We just need to find a place to park. We'll shut down the aircraft and let's take a look around the airport.